Under the Royal House of Windsor, Britain stands united. The words United Kingdom are more than a name. They signify a deep-seated loyalty and affection for Britain's established system of popular or constitutional monarchy. This unity has grown with the generations. To Queen Victoria, who reigned 63 years, there came in her old age a great demonstration of affectionate congratulations on her Diamond Jubilee. When she died, the kings and princes of those times thronged to pay tribute in her funeral procession. The Victorian era had ended, but popular monarchy went on and naturally gathered strength. Edward VII was not only a great sportsman, he was wise in the ways of statesmanship when late in life he came to the throne. Edward the Peacemaker, he was called. He recognized the German peril and encouraged his ministers to make friends with France. But the First World War did not come in his short reign of 9 years. The clash of nations was reserved for the early years of his successor. George V, newly ascended to the throne, found himself at the head of a nation plunged in a life-and-death struggle with the German Empire. In this struggle, thrones and crowns were swept away throughout Central Europe. But the British monarchy, identified with the people's valiant spirit of endurance, was established more surely, more securely. King George visited the war fronts continually, and an historic picture shows him with Haig, Foch, and the French president at Foch's headquarters. Peace brought its own problems, but none which dimmed the popularity of King George V and Queen Mary. One occasion which gave great pleasure to the reigning monarch and his wife was the marriage of their second son, the Duke of York, and Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon. A royal marriage is always an occasion for rejoicing, but few of the spectators in 1923 can have guessed how much the future destiny of their country was bound up with this particular royal event. The birth of Princess Elizabeth was, of course, a source of joy to both parents and grandparents, whose example of happy home life was a steadying influence amid the changing standards of some 25 years ago. So it was, too, with the conduct of public affairs. Constancy and a sense of duty were strong characteristics of King George V. They contributed powerfully to bringing Britain through the political strains and stresses of those years. The Jubilee of his accession was a wonderful and emotional anniversary. Britain and the Commonwealth rose as one to the occasion, cheering and thanking God as the King and Queen Mary drove to St. Paul's to render thanksgiving after 25 years of faithful service. In that period of 25 years, new channels of information had come into existence, making rulers better known to their peoples. On the radio, King George's voice was familiar in every home.
How could I fail to note in all the rejoicing not merely respect for the throne, but a warm and generous remembrance of the man himself who, may God help him, has been placed upon it. It is this personal link between me and my people, which I value more than I can say. It binds us together in all our common joys and sorrows.
Films recorded all his public appearances. Under the searching glare of publicity, the prestige of the monarchy increased, with the public's opportunity to form a more personal judgment on the character of its king and queen. When King George died, the universal sorrow was deep and genuine, and the Commonwealth followed him to his last resting place with an unconcealed sense of bereavement. King Edward VIII, now Duke of Windsor, succeeded him, and in a short reign showed himself gravely concerned with the economic conditions of the times and the distress of unemployment. The personal dilemma which caused his abdication is a well-known story. Looking back, we can see how strong must be the attachment of Britain to the throne that it was able to absorb that violent shock and in a few years rise to new levels of devotion. Our present king was crowned in Westminster Abbey in accordance with ritual which has existed for over 1,000 years. Films presented the spectacle to the public gaze for the first time. Here, in this ceremony, was food for thought. The endurance of monarchy in the same line through all these centuries, and the preservation of the forms by which the wearer of the crown receives it. The king no longer wields absolute power. Power is exercised in his name, and the power exercised is by no means absolute anymore. But the king is head of the state. His part in the British parliamentary system is vital and continuous, and as more countries of the British Commonwealth attain to the status of complete self-government, his position as head of a family of states grows in constitutional significance. The coronation was attended, of course, by the prime ministers of the Commonwealth. A great and splendid interlude, clouded by the menace of a second world war. Thus arrived another supreme testing time, not only for the character and strength of the British people, but for the institutions under which they live and have developed. Each came triumphantly through that ordeal, so recent in our memories. The superiority of the democratic way of life over dictatorship was proved. In the persons of King George and Queen Elizabeth, constitutional monarchy once more was vindicated. Shared the trials and dangers of their people, and their own home at Buckingham Palace suffered in the Blitz. The next generation was, of course, growing up during this war period. The early years of Princess Elizabeth and Princess Margaret are well documented with films, both those for publication and those made privately. Princess Elizabeth, it will be remembered, reached the age of 18 in 1944, and thereupon joined the Women's Auxiliary Territorial Service. Came the day when war in Europe ended, V.E.DAY. Automatically, the rejoicing multitude surged to Buckingham Palace to share their sense of relief and exultation with the royal family. Another expression of public affection and regard was evoked by the celebration of that important milestone in married life, the 25th wedding anniversary. The King and Queen celebrated their silver wedding day in April 1948, driving to St. Paul's. Later, they undertook an extended tour of London. The King broadcast his own impressions of that day in these words.
It has been made the occasion of a worldwide expression of kindly goodwill towards us, which has greatly moved us. It has been an unforgettable experience to realize how many thousands of people there are in this world who wish to join in the thankfulness we feel for the 25 years of supremely happy married life which have been granted to us.
Canada had been visited by the King and Queen in 1938, just prior to the war. Their reception had been overwhelming throughout the 9 provinces. From the great cities of the East, they journeyed across the prairies to the Rockies and British Columbia, and the significance of the tour was heightened by the imminence of the tragedy which was about to convulse first Europe, then the whole world. Long before, as Duke and Duchess of York, they had visited Australia, when the King, during the reign of his father, had opened the new Parliament building at Canberra. A second tour of Australia and New Zealand had been planned and was due to take place in 1949. Its abandonment, owing to the King's illness, has been a profound disappointment, not least to the King himself. There is little doubt that the distressing obstruction of his blood circulation has been caused by conscientiousness. The conscientiousness with which he has refused all these years to spare himself in his public duties. There had been no hint of this ailment on the memorable tour of South Africa in 1947, which had been thoroughly enjoyed by all members of the royal family. Relations between the mother country and dominions have changed in 50 years and may change still further. But the Crown remains the visible tie between the countries of the Commonwealth. Once again in this tour, the monarchy was contributing to the growth of the only unity on which a Commonwealth of nations can be based, a unity of spirit and sentiment. Or maybe express the thought this way: the royal family is dedicated to discovering the ideal form of cooperation by which a group of countries may live and work in harmony together, and yet each fulfill its own destiny. The tour included northern and southern Rhodesia, with of course the Victoria Falls, and the grave of Cecil Rhodes. Princess Elizabeth gave words to her own high ideals when she spoke in South Africa on her 21st birthday.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
On her return from South Africa, it was with delight that the country learned of her engagement to Lieutenant Mountbatten. As heiress presumptive to the throne, her choice of a husband was obviously a matter of intimate concern to every one of her father's subjects. With quick perception, the public realized that she had made a worthy choice. Her wedding was a joyful event for almost the whole world. For the royal family, certainly, for Britain and the Commonwealth, obviously, and for all countries who want to see Britain a strong and abiding force dedicated to the best interests of mankind. For it's logical that if the Commonwealth is to continue to undertake its enormous world responsibilities, it must remain strong at the center. There must be an assurance that the United Kingdom will live up to its tradition of unity and its standard of kingship. The characters of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, of Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh, give us this assurance of the future. And now that the marriage of the Princess and the Duke has been blessed with the arrival of a son, we can look forward even to a distant future with the same confidence. The British people welcome Prince Charles and say with all sincerity, long may the House of Windsor continue to reign over us.